Hey, Ryan Omega here with some producery notes for this episode of Live Action Roleplay. The first one is that if the audio sounds a little bit different in this episode, it's because normally we have James from Ancient Archives Apparel who brings his own mics and mixer to record for us and then gives me a file for audio. However, this episode was recorded so close to the launch date that I decided to forego the option in order to make sure that I had the content to be able to edit that and make sure it goes out on Wednesday. So if anyone's to be blamed for that audio thing, that would be me. The second one is that we just acquired the lifeactionroleplay.com website name. So if you go to that website in your browser, it will take you to the Podbean site, which hosts our audio. If you've been a long-time listener, thank you for supporting us all this time. When we started, we didn't know what we're doing, and we're learning a little bit each time. And if you are a first-time listener, thank you for giving us a shot. And over time, we're going to have more topics, more guests, and more content available to you, and maybe a couple of surprises. We'll see. We don't know. And until then, theme music.
Welcome to Live Action Roleplay with
Cynthia
and Kai
and Omega, brought to you by, what drinks do we have tonight?
Tea.
Lots and lots of PG tips.
And tea with milk. I have no idea what Kai served me.
PG tips.
Okay.
Or
PG
Tetley, one of the two.
Or Tetley, one of those.
No.
I'm also combining this with Califia Farms Unsweetened Black and White Cold Brew Coffee, so I am on so much coffee right now.
You're so hype.
I am so hyper!
Wait, are you mixing so you're mixing
Yes, he's
tea
mixing his
and
tea
coffee.
and his coffee is
Right.
exactly what
Get
he's
out.
doing.
Get out of my house.
Fine.
We are listeners, we are recording in my house for once. Usually we record at Sins.
Yes.
Which has good acoustics. We'll see how this works out this time too.
Yes.
I needed the coffee because I need to stay awake.
Now, shall we do shout-outs, or
Yes.
shall we mention our guest first?
Let's do shout-outs first.
Okay.
Sin.
Oh, okay. So my shout out goes to Luana Marquez in Brazil. She started listening to our podcast about around Christmas time, and she's become a bit of a fan. So hi, Luana. Thank you for listening.
Actually, we love hearing from fans, so if you guys want to reach out to us, send us an email. Ryan, what's our email?
Our email is lifeactionroleplay@gmail.com.
Cool, yeah, so we love to hear from people and have your opinions and things like that, so please share. We love hearing from you guys. Ryan, do you want to do a shout-out now?
Yes, I want to do a shout-out to my cast on Fury's Fate, because last night, which was episode 10, it was supposed to be near TPK. Like, we were almost about to die, but we somehow, with the cooperation of everybody there, Kyle, Dodger, Sig, Kim, and Octopimp, we managed to survive. I lived with 1 hit point, and Rudy gave me an inspiration point, which is so hard to get from Rudy. And I think I'm the only one this season to get one for saving Lapad by warping us out of a fight.
Well done.
So, thanks to my fellow cast members there.
Nicely done. My shout-out is actually something I think all three of us are kind of like super still like vibrating and ringing from, because it was well, that might not have been the perfect choice of words, but still we're going with it. Buzzing with excitement over a friend of ours, Bruce, had roughly about a 35 people birthday party. His birthday party was at a new place that he moved to that's a very decadent kind of house with a lot of open space. And it was a beautiful piece of real estate, but most importantly, he decided that the best way to celebrate his birthday was to run a multi-tiered, multifaceted escape room LARP, where everyone was given secret identities and motives and goals at the start of the game, kind of well in advance. So we all had our own backstories that we were slowly revealing, as well as dealing with all of the different themed puzzles and individual rooms that we were trying to escape from or puzzle through. And it was an intense experience, both as a LARPing thing and as a very good escape room environment.
And you were not football tackled into the pool.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
Rather than the last birthday party I went to. Actually, that's a wonderful time for us to introduce this mysterious voice. This is a perfect moment for us to introduce our guest for the evening. Ivan, would you mind?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. This is Ivan Van Norman. I'm coming from across the street at Kai's house, hanging out on this live-action role-play fun extravaganza evening of wonderfulness. Hello.
Some of you listeners may recognize Ivan from several of his shows on Geek and Sundry. Most particularly the Sagas of Sundry.
Sagas of Sundry.
I almost said Sagas of Sadness.
Sadness. There is a lot of sadness in the show.
Yeah.
But no, we just, so Sagas of Sundry Dread, which was the first season. Sagas of Sundry Madness, which is the second season. And before then, there was a couple of other fun little shows, but those are the most recent. And hopefully many more to come. Plus I do stuff on the YouTubes with my child.
Yeah.
Like the Nerds with Kids, with Trish Hirschberger and Lasercorn. So.
Actually, if I recall, about 3 or 4 months ago, your Kickstarter was all wrapped up for...
I also make games. I also like role-playing games, and I publish them occasionally. So we put out we pre-ordered, kickstarted. I don't know, people say Kickstarter is not a pre-order market. You get the games early. It may as well be a pre-order. We two titles. Outbreak Undead 2nd Edition, which is a zombie survival simulation RPG. We put that together, and that was graciously funded by the community. And then another one called Kids on Bikes, which is from Doug Ledobansky and Mr. Jonathan Gilmore, who people may know from Dead of Winter. He made that board game, is what I'm trying to say. And it is a strange adventures in small towns. If you want to run the Goonies, or if you want to do Stranger Things, or if you want to do Stand By Me, or any other kind of Kids on Bikes adventure, Kids on Bikes, the RPG, is a pretty good way to do it.
Does it count?
It totally counts.
A little more dark, but yes.
A little more dark, but it is still kids triumphing, which is something that Stephen King is so gracious. At least he can do terrifying things in his books, but at least he doesn't harm the children.
He waits for them to grow up and then kills them.
Yes. Yes.
And not only that, but there was the ABCs of RPGs, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's also a lovely little children's book I put out about 2 years ago called The ABCs of RPGs. We are actually working on the 1, 2, 3s of RPGs presently. But yeah, it's that is on ThinkGeek and Amazon, and God damn it, Kai, I don't even know what I do anymore, man.
You've just got so many wonderful projects. What I'm trying to impress upon our viewers is that
Viewers?
Listeners.
I mean, they're staring at whatever mobile device they're listening to this on right now.
Fair enough.
Counts, right?
Fair enough, I guess.
So what I'm trying to impress is that Ivan has many influences and skills when it comes to producing things for us as nerdy consumers.
I call them tendrils of influence. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Perfect.
Kai. I appreciate it. So.
Well, I appreciate you for coming here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
How would you describe Sagas of Sundry, Madness, or any of your series to someone who's never seen it?
So, the best way that I can explain Sagas of Sundry, which is the new weird thing at the moment, is I came up with this silly acronym for it, but it's about as close as I think I can get to it at this stage. And it's a TDRRPG. And that stands for Theatrical Drama Reality Role-Playing Game. Yes. So the idea is that the characters in the show, because it is a show, are committed to a level of dedication with their character that one would expect from a community theater or something that is essentially on stage as a performance. When they're on, when they're there, they're on. And then when the cameras are off, they can take a break, but basically they're there the entire time. The only difference is because it's a role-playing game, nothing is scripted as far as lines go. Mm-hmm. There are, certain milestones and plot points which can be hit or plot out beforehand, but as far as the details of how and when they get to these places are, just like any game, up for interpretation. So that's the theatrical drama element of it. The reality element of it kind of pulls from the tropes that reality shows tend to work with. Eliminations, skill challenges, practical puzzles that include immersion into the show. And immersion is a big thing that I focused on in this show as just, hey, how do we take the beautiful things we love about role-playing games and how do we pull it off the table and not throw beanbags at each other pretending that they'll be fireballs. Let's try to make the immersion into it. And the good news is that horror does that really well because horror is relatable. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you have modern characters, they're even more relatable. So that's a good place to start. That's why it's a very distinctly different thing. Like, immersion tools are there in order to support the story, not to tell the story, if that makes any sense.
A game is only as good as its story, not as good as its system. You can have a system that is literally run on beans.
Well, in this case, it was run on a stack of wood. Because the game system it's a system from, called Dread, from Windmill Press, co-written by Epidiah Ravachol, and it's... for all intents and purposes, it is a set of blocks from using a stack of wood that is similar but legally distinct from the game Jenga. And the idea is that when you want to commit an action that could be dangerous or risky, instead of rolling a pair of dice to determine what your check is, you pull a block from the tower. And if the tower should ever fall in the process of making a check, well, something terrible happens. Usually a character death or them removed from the game in one form or another. So it is an elimination tactic that you can use. And, there is nothing more at stake than your position and your place in the story. So yanking on that block is not something just as simple as, oh, okay, well, yeah, it's fine. No, it's pretty intense. Speaking from a position of which I'm forcing these people to do these things. So
what's one of the strangest things you've forced people to do?
Actually, before we get to that point, I'd love to ask a question about the Jenga system. Jenga, not Jenga. The Dread system, yeah. One thing that I found really, really super exciting about the idea of the Jenga system, Dread system. The thing that I found the most interesting about that was as you said, it kind of built tension. The players can start dealing with a bunch of mundane, easier things that might in a D&D game involve dice, like simple dice rolls.
Right.
But when it starts coming to that moment of tension and real danger, the players have done so many mundane things that you've kind of set them against that you can have that crescendo moment.
There's an escalation in Dread for sure. Because yes, the simplest pulls are always the simplest starts. So the first couple of pulls they're usually just ways to build the tension, but then it does absolutely escalate as they start getting into it, in which most pulls would only need to be made if it is literally a life or death situation. So yes, it's actually great for pacing. It's
awesome.
Lovely.
Thank you.
And as far as what I've done, the terrible things
I'm sorry about that.
That I've laid out into that. I would actually say the first challenge I put on the first season was pretty bold of me. So the world, the game for season 1 was set in a woods. So it was a very 80s slasher kind of drama. And one of the big things that they came to when things started to kind of go down is, of course, abandoned mansion out in the middle of the woods. Let's go find out because we're getting rained on and all of our gear was lost. So they basically went to this house because they're getting rained out, and they're like, well, we can't get in, the front door's locked. This place looks abandoned. And there's a note they had to decode a cipher to learn that the key was under the porch somewhere. And we actually made a facade, like we made a full front door facade, so that we could use it in the background. But then we also put the key, I'm doing quotes in the air. Air quotes. The key under the porch. And they found this by basically finding the box. So the box represents this position under the porch where they have to reach in. But we took this box and brought it back to the table and said, okay, in that box is the key. Who's going to get the key? You know? And they know something's wrong. And they don't know what is wrong, but they know something's wrong.
It's like Saw.
But the and it was to the point of where I said, because we put thin film on the top of it, black film, so they can't see inside, and said you have to punch your hand through there, reach in and get it. And of course, I filled the box to the brim with Vaseline, cockroaches, maggots, and mealworms.
Oh hell!
Are they all alive?
They're all live. Yeah. And
It's amazing.
of course, it was
You would like
Amy
that.
Dallin, who
of course.
who reached in for it, who was playing Raina, and she's like, "Okay, I'm going to do this," and she pushed her hand into it. And the best part is, and this is actually a funny story that came outside of the cut. The cut basically showed her pulling it in and then screaming and dropping the box. But what happened actually on set is she punched her hand in, and she's like, "Oh, okay. There's a bunch of dry leaves inside of here." Because she had no idea what was going on.
Oh, thank God.
And then she pulled the key out, and I'm like, "Oh, that was fucking anticlimactic." That's okay. And it's like, "Raina, what did you think was inside of there?" And she's like, "I don't know." And she pulled out a handful. All right. Scream! Drop the box, bugs everywhere. Oh. You know? And so we had to use that cut for her reaction as she was pulling stuff out, and then she had the key later. But it was so good. It was so good, and I felt a little bad, but not really. You know, because they're all very harmless.
So remember how I said earlier that I wanted to be on this?
Yeah.
Scratch that. After that story.
And it is not necessarily the worst thing I've done, but it is definitely one of the more memorable things.
I will watch how people react to this instead of me wanting to be on that.
They all know what they were signing up for. So I made it very clear. It's one of the things about doing horror and role-playing games, and one of the things about doing a type of immersion and intensity that a show like Sagas brings to the table, is that boundaries need to be laid out very clearly.
Yes.
The session 0 in something like Sagas of Sundry is very thick. What do you not want to talk about? What are hot button topics for you? What are you not comfortable bringing up inside of the game? Do you know that I will do terrible, terrible, terrible things to you, and are you okay with that?
So, real quick, for those of our listeners who are relatively new to the LARP world or role-playing world, someone describe Session 0.
Oh, Session 0 is the talk, the pre-talk before you begin the game. In some lands of role-playing games, it is character creation. It's just, okay, well, this is the Session 0 is when we make characters. But it should also be about what do you expect out of the game? What do you hope to gain from the game? What type of story are we all telling together? Because it's a community story. It is not just the game master's story, and it is not just for the player's pleasure.
Hear, hear.
And there's all of these things that usually should be brought up when you're early into it, because the last thing you want is for people not to be on the same page at some point in the campaign when it is already too late. You know?
Fair enough.
So everyone gave me their unwavering consent to do whatever the hell I wanted with them. And so I did.
Well done. Also, did you know, side note, you probably did know this, but
Yes.
Sagas of Sundry also spells out SOS.
Yup. Sauce. Yeah. So many things. In fact, we've had some fun fan art in which they planted some crazy seeds. In Madness, one of the characters is a early 90s black hat hackerish type, and she has a terrible visualization that happens during her story in which the words "help me, help me, help me, help me, help me" are being spammed across her computer screen, and then she thinks it's her boyfriend that she's currently on like a live chat with, and so she's freaking out, and then it stops suddenly, and she realizes her hands are on the keyboard in the HELP
Oh my god.
status. So when we when that show aired and some of the stuff happening, and it's like we literally got someone did a cross stitch that was just binary, and they broke down "help me" in binary.
Oh, wow.
And that was part of their
Cool.
contribution in the fan art world, which was amazing.
So, may I ask, what made you think of doing a show like this?
Oh, that's a really... So, I played Dread. I played Dread a lot, but my first introduction to playing Dread on camera was actually on Tabletop Season 3 with Will Wheaton, and he asked me to play Dread with Laura Bailey and another young woman who I'm actually having a hard time
Were you
remembering.
playing, or...
I was playing.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Was
so
Will Wheaton...
He was DMing.
Oh.
And so I was playing Dread as a player, and just it was so good for camera because we're all just telling our story and we're all playing the game, and I got to experience it on that end of things. He was running a scenario from the back of the core book, but it still was great. It still worked because it's a fun story. Now, flashback to years after that, I'm running this event called International Tabletop Day for Geek and Sundry. So there's a big, long live stream that is a day of celebrating board games. And I'm like, oh my god, I have to run a game. And like most things, I have a week to put this together. Who's going to play, and what am I going to play? Well, crap, I really know how to play Dread well, and I enjoy Dread, and I think that's fun. Let's do Dread. And, who's going to play? Fuck, okay, who can I call right now? Thankfully, I'm on good enough terms with Amy Vorpal, Amy Dallin, Taliesin Jaffe, Matthew Mercer, and Satine Phoenix, that they were literally all willing to last minute commit to playing my game for Tabletop Day. And so we just played a 2.5 hour long session for the stream. We had a fun little adventure. Everyone was playing it. They all dressed up in their little characters, and we had a good time with it. And people loved it. They thought it was great. They're like, "Oh my god, make a show of this! This is so cool! Let's do Dread." And we're like, "Okay, great. Let's just take Dread and do that." But then I was talking with the creative team over at Geek and Sundry, and like, "Well, there's an opportunity here because Dread is so simple. What could we do?" And I've been very familiar with like the lawn versions of Jenga before. So I was like, "Well, fuck, what if we got like the big ass tower?" And just played it with there. And then it's like, okay, well, if we're going to get the big ass tower and it's going to be taking up, like, what would happen if, and I think actually it was Mercer who originally brought up, he's like, what if we basically like had good enough camera coverage to get you up out of your seat and actually go and interact with the players, like not stay stuck in the standard like I'm at the head of the table. Because if everyone's going to be sitting on logs in front of a campfire with the tower there, like who's to say that you can't get out of your chair? And I'm like, oh,
that's cool.
Shit, you're right.
Wow.
And so then that kind of snowballed, and I attached a director who I'm a big fan of. He did Titan's Grave, Tabletop. And Spellslingers. So a lot of Geek and Sundry's higher class products. And I said, hey, I really want to do this off the wall show. It's very different. He's like, oh my god, I do a show like this for YouTube Red called Escape the Night, where we do all of these like interactive elements. His was very much like there's no game mechanics at all. It's just characters that they're YouTubers dressed up as what their characters are, and they're just hitting plot points. But it's all improv too, but there's no stakes because there's no mechanics to it. So we found a weird hybrid of like, Adam Lawson brought an amazing look to the show as a good director does. And then we kind of broke the walls of what it is to do an RPG show in the creative room because we had the system to do so. And then we had the proof of concept of knowing that people already liked these characters and liked this idea pre-established. So those three kind of made a perfect triangle of what became Sagas of Sundry. And then we decided, okay, well, if we're gonna take Dread and go again, like let's make it a thing that we can keep doing, and we just doubled down, And so far so good.
And presently, the series is still rolling. Are you allowed to say how many episodes total?
So Sagas of Sundry Dread is 6 episodes. Sagas of Sundry Madness is 8 episodes.
Total.
Gotcha. And so those are the 2 that are out. They're all on ProjectAlpha.com right now, which is Geek and Sundry's and Nerdist's SVOD platform, subscriber video on demand. So that if you want to, if anyone who's a fan of Critical Role will know that they can go watch premium content on there. And Sagas of Sundry is one of those things.
So Madness is recently ended then.
It did. It ended right before the New Year.
Wow.
And then, but this Saturday we're doing a extended Q&A, what they call One Night Only, in which I bring the whole cast back and we answer questions from the audience, and it's essentially our little behind the actor's studio.
So actually, one of our guests from a previous episode, Xander.
Xander, right?
So he was he was gushing about how excited he was to be a part of it because episodes were, to my knowledge, airing but not finished airing when we did the interview, and there was a lot that he couldn't talk about, obviously, and he was very respectful of that. He was practically gushing.
Did he have fun?
It.
I was going to say, did he have a good time?
He loved it. Cool. And after watching the series in its entirety now, I really, really, really enjoyed what was going on. I think I'm about maybe 10 minutes to the end of the final episode.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So I'm almost done. But you guys have just an amazing tone to the experience, and
that's great. Thank you.
I think one of the main reasons why we were so excited to bring you on board and talk with you about this is because the level of emotional intensity that you provoke in your game is kind of the best example that we've really seen of seeing something more similar to the emotional intensity of LARPing.
Right. Yes.
When everything perfectly aligns. There are obviously times where any roleplay game can be a little stale and stagnant, but there are other times where everything ticks off in that perfect way.
And that's usually how it is, and it's a large portion of a lot of that just comes down to stripping a lot of the things that normally slow pacing down in games. So it's because when things like dice come out and minis come out and there's combat, it usually becomes a different thing. And if you want to talk about emotional intensity, one of the things that we do on Sagas with the cast especially is I try to remove the barriers of what allows for instant reaction. So if you think about it, the difference between an honest reaction and a constructed reaction is how much time it takes between Kai saying something and then me responding to it. Because if I have to basically filter my response through if I have to create my response and it has to go through a filter that is my character, so if I have to ask myself, okay, what would my character say, I've already lost it. You know? So and there's a position in which when you get that intense into your role play, and it literally does become like an acting thing, you are no longer playing a character, you are the character. And so when you are able to remove that milliseconds of delay, you start to find honest reactions with stuff getting into it. And that can literally be as simple as the actor or the player, whatever is in their brain, is able to turn off that Brita filter and then just go straight with the gory stuff from the tap, you know, and just hammer it down. And that's one of the things that we talk about with the cast. It's like you need to have permission to make the hard choice. All right? Because if you're not allowed to make the hard choice, and if you're worried about your reaction, and especially if it's one of those things that's, oh my god, am I going to offend this person by getting mad at them right now by what I'm doing? And I know a lot of the challenges that can come from LARPing community is that not everyone's always on the same page, or their character can bleed into their life.
Yes.
And there's a lot of how do people handle that? And even on Sagas, it was in a controlled environment and everyone was in a safe place. But even then, after they were all done with the show, they had a full day of decompression because it was just they were still so into it that they weren't able to pull themselves out.
There were scenes where one character kind of had a little nugget of a secret of another character, and when those two characters revealed that to each other, there was a very fuck you moment,
right?
Which got intense,
and the GM has to be allowed to be able to take that and explore what that means and not be afraid of, oh, is player A and player B okay? Mm-hmm. You know?
I literally just had this moment on an online forum. Literally.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I'm playing a game, Vampire Requiem now, and is literally session 0.
Yeah.
And I am playing a remotely different character than what I'm normally playing. It's still the princess archetype.
You're going off your chart. You're going off your beaten path.
My normal, yeah. So this character is an utter just bitch. Like, doesn't care what mess she makes. She's just out there. So I got several messages while I was busy on Monday saying, somebody just called your character out. You need to go read. And I'm like, I haven't even created my freaking handle. Like, what the... All right, so I created my handle, I got on, and said person, my character was on her phone the whole time, and this said person who's playing the harpy goes, is that all she does? Just stay on her phone the entire time? And I had this moment of like, fine! And I constructed this entire post of the bitchiest things that I could possibly say, and I had that moment of, what would my character say? Would my character say this? And I was like, well... I wouldn't say this, but send.
Well, then here's the thing too. Is this what your character would say? What in a perfect world, and it's difficult because you're going through several filters, like an online forum. Plus, you're going what in there. If in a place in which you have a camera on you, it would be what's the first thing that comes out,
right?
And is that first thing that comes out coming from a guttural place in which you are rating the mindset of your bitchy character? Because you're tapping into probably some element of like, okay, this is who I am right now, and let's just go with it. And then the good news is because it's role-playing games, it's like you're just throwing the ball.
Yep.
All right? And then someone's got to deal with that reaction and come back with it. And those kind of scenes, it's really just the GM's prerogative to referee pace.
Right.
Because if that cat fight starts getting a little too much and it starts carrying the story too much, then that's when the GM basically has to pull
the ball away,
pull the ball away and be like, something's happening right now. Deal with it. And guess what? That makes for great drama. Especially unresolved fights. Amazing.
Drama king.
But again, if a character's only focused on drama and never finds resolution, then you're basically playing a very two-dimensional character.
So you talked about decompression. I was actually going to ask you what type of aftercare, since it's such an intense show, what kind of aftercare do you offer your... I want to call them actors because it's a show, but it's like players. Okay, players.
So
your suffer puppets.
It's suffer puppets. Yes, locked in.
Copyright.
So what we would do a lot is it would mostly just be about cameras are off. Let's all hug it out. Let's talk about it. What happened? What were we excited about? What felt great? It is essentially the best decompression on a show like this is where we just get to gush about how amazing we all are and how much of a good time we had playing the game together. Maybe we'll go get drinks. Maybe we'll go get pancakes. Whatever it is. And then things like this Saturday for O&O are also another kind of decompression because it allows us to come back in a place of reflection, button up all of the stuff, and then walk away with it and be able to say, okay, that was great. We just put a little bow on that and we put it to bed. So there's a lot, but it really just comes down to everybody being like, are we all right? Is everything okay? Hug it out. And then be able to walk away knowing that everyone was honest with their reactions.
That's good.
So, and not everyone's just gushing because that's the thing that everyone should be doing right now.
Yeah, all about handling bleed, as we call it.
Bleed, right. And that's fine because and again, everyone has different stages of how they can handle that because the one benefit that I have from Sagas that not everyone has is I'm working with actors who are used to being professionals and can walk away from their shit.
Yeah.
All right? They can use it and work with it, and they might hold on to it for a little while. It really gave me a new respect for people who do the method acting deep. But at the same time, they're not going to walk away emotionally scarred. They're just going to feel like, oh my god, I challenged myself in a way I've never done it before, and it feels great.
Awesome.
So does that make sense?
Yeah. It's pretty exciting.
What are some, I guess, production considerations that you have to take in when producing a show like this?
There's a lot of moving parts.
I bet.
Yeah.
it's so tough because I have a director who's theoretically making sure he's calling the shots when it's in there, but essentially, since I'm holding the story, it's like managing tone and pace during the game, and then making sure that all the art elements and assets are in place. Is there a puzzle here and there? And making sure that is playing out the way that it should be. We didn't cut the camera a lot, but we did cut it when we would have to do moves and things like that. And I mean, one of the production things is in place is that, locations are expensive, sets are expensive, and you don't have all day to do this. I had 2 days to get the show. And I had to deliver a certain amount of episodes, which means it's my job not only to get the day, but also make sure that the story's told. You know,
Wow.
and then be able to make sure that that story is told in the parameters of using the elements that we want to in place. And that's why I said, good role-playing games, you never know what's going to happen. But, you know, I have a book that has 10 eyes on the front of it that I made as a plot hook in Madness. I'm going to want them to get that book at some point. How the fuck they get that book, we'll figure it out when we get there. But I know that that book is important for them for the story, so they need to get a hold of it somehow. And that's just little things like that you never really get a chance, you don't really have to consider in a standard game, because you don't have to worry about, okay, they don't get to the book, it's not important, I'll find another way to get that information to them through some other plot device. All right? And thankfully I haven't had to, the only thing is in Dread the first day, because we shot that entire series in one day, there was a large portion of the story that was completely passed over and ignored simply because we had no time. Wow. All right? So there was a large, I would say the middle arc, which was all of it taking place in the house, none of it was even explored at all because just it needed to happen. You know? I got very quickly to the climax of that arc. Very quickly.
I know that this weekend when Sin and Kai were playing in the puzzle room, basically escape house, that we were doing, I was a storyteller in that game.
Yeah, Ryan, you actually wrote one of those rooms, didn't you?
Yeah, I wrote the Infernal Room. So
Didn't even get to go in.
I know, like, so many people wanted to go into that room, but I was happy that Satine got into that room. Jason Carl from White Wolf, producing Vampire, got into that room. And
is this an actual escape room, or was this a puzzle room designed in the game?
so what we did was, since this was for Bruce's birthday party.
The second.
Bruce's birthday
Yeah,
party.
Bruce's birthday party.
So
Instead of having an escape room, we had an escape house.
Yeah,
And
the
then
whole house to figure it out.
Yes.
Yeah, which is great.
But because there were so many different rooms, we needed multiple storytellers to be in charge of particular rooms, because we had 3 weeks to build it, and then we also had to figure out how all the stories interacted.
Woof.
What was really interesting about that is there were a good 5 or 6 different rooms. There was kind of like a weird celestial style room. There was definitely like a fae room. There was a demonic kind of like infernal area. There was one that was very specifically like the spirits and afterlives.
Did you have to reset these rooms after the room?
They didn't.
They were actually one-time use.
They were one-time use, but they were kind of multifaceted, where you would solve a few in one of the rooms, which would actually get you a key for one of the other rooms puzzles to help further.
Yeah.
And so it required a lot of player communication and people kind of finding out where things were and bouncing
when
between.
you have 30 people, it's not so bad. It's not like 100 folks that you have to go through, but still 30 people being able to be able to go through the entire room and know that there's other parts into it. I see what you're saying, because there may be standalone rooms that one of the payoffs in there is that it gives you an element that works into another room.
Yeah. Yes.
And they may
Which
have
is-
a blockade until that element is
And
solved.
then add on the people's backstories and interests of their characters. Some of them may not have led on some of the clues that some of the other rooms might have needed.
Yeah.
It's very delightful.
It could have gone spectacularly bad. I have played in another game which required the construction of this kind of small Cthulhu idol that I had crafted for the actual production, and it was about 5 or 6 different pieces, almost Legend of the Hidden Temple, the silver monkey. But it was a Cthulhu, and in various pieces, and some guest was participating, left early, and
Took a piece with them.
they decided to keep the head as a memento, so the story could not finish.
Yeah, like
Which meant that the players lost. I'm
that was one of the things that we actually had to consider when we constructed that room. So the storytellers actually had to constantly talk to each other during the game to make sure, is this the right pace? Did someone hide a piece?
Right.
And then how do we make sure that people were not stuck and basically lost because someone lost a piece? So
Well, you also have a good, and to be fair, it sounds like you had a select group of people who you could trust and appreciate. It wasn't a bunch of randos.
Yeah, rather than just ticket payers who showed up or
ticket
something
payers,
like that.
which can always, you never know what you're going to get with the general audience. But since this was kind of a group of, again, they're friends of the birthday boy, and so they'll all have a certain amount of loyalty and respect to him anyway, But that's unique. I mean, the live thing is something I've yet to still crack in a way. We had a controlled element with the show, but being able to do it live, as you sounded like you were doing with the party, is a whole nother goddamn piece of pie.
Side note for you, storyteller of Bruce's birthday party.
yes, ma'am.
Green Slinky? Did anyone find out the significance of that one?
That was not my storyline, so I have no idea.
Probably some weird
That also
fable
helps
shit.
that you just had to own whatever was in your place as well, too.
Yeah, like I also knew that
That was a smart idea. Sorry.
my particular storyline, because I decided to make sure that everyone had the warning about my room, because it was not for everyone. Like Kelly Lynn from Girls Guts Glory was an attendee of this game, and she could not do my room. She came in, she appreciated the room, and then she walked out.
Right, that's fine.
And
again, pop, whatever your button is.
Yeah,
We don't have to press it.
And I gave
knowing your
everyone
players'
full
hard
warning.
limits, yeah.
Yes.
Knowing your players' hard limits, and it's fine. I'm dealing with that now with a new show I'm working on, in which I'm having to make some decisions. And my challenge on this new show is actually still being able to keep the pace that I had in something like Sagas, but still keep it on the table with dice.
Oh,
Okay.
Which is going to be tougher, which is going to be some choices. It's going to lean a lot more on editing, I have a feel like, into it, but that's just part of the discovery,
One of the things that I really appreciate about LARP particularly is because there's so many moving parts and players, you can't guarantee that all of your content is going to be PC for every player.
Oh, yeah.
And therefore, while you try to be respectful, you can't necessarily just be like, fuck it, I'll do whatever I want, because that's going to not win you any favors. At the end of the day, a lot of the time a LARP is a business, and your business is making other people happy.
Right.
However, there's something that all LARPers should always kind of remind themselves, that they can opt out. If you are in a situation that you are uncomfortable with, and you are up to that point, then you check out. You go, I'm sorry, I cannot continue this roleplay. Consequences are going to happen. You're not going to magically disappear, but you can just be like, this is too intense for me, or this is something I have no intention of exploring. I'm out. Wish you the best. Bye. And you step away.
The analogy that I might use, that this kind of reminds me of when you're talking about this is what everyone needs to have a good time, it makes me feel like a person who runs a LARP is the equivalent of a hotel concierge.
To a degree, yes.
That
sounds about right.
There's a lot of people who are in your hotel, and they're all there to stay and have a good time, and it's your job to kind of run a business, but also every guest is, hey, how you doing, checking in, do you need water, do you need towels, do you need all this kind of stuff, and be able to make sure that everyone's running the game the way they want it to go.
Yeah.
But that's tough. It's tough. It's also, do you know about the book The Tipping Point?
I don't. What is that, please?
So there's a business book called The Tipping Point that talks about how businesses and certain events in cultural history can happen because of small details. Big events happen because of small details. They call it the tipping point, and it's the idea that some things call it the rise of hush puppies, which is an example they use in the late 90s. The resurgence of the coolness of hush puppies. The reasons that stuff happens can be laid out the same way that a major epidemic, like a disease, like an epidemic, can be laid out. You know?
Subject zero, as it were.
Well, subject zero, stickiness, context, just a couple of small influencers pushing the right buttons in the right area in order to make something move quickly. And one of these things that they explore in this book is the law of 150. And it's this idea that human beings, as a general, create social circles that aren't usually larger than 150. Like 150, if there's 150 people into a group, that's about the biggest number that our brains can actually handle socially, that we become emotionally invested into enough that we care about their opinions, we can relate to them, and we can manage 150 relationships inside of each other. An example that they use is that in most of military history, companies are no bigger than 200. That's it. End of story. And it's because at 200 people, it can actually self-regulate itself pretty well. Like if you're in a group of 200 and you all know each other fairly well, you are responsible enough to each other that you don't need outside management to necessarily come in and crack down, so to speak. You get bigger than that, then it starts getting to where people are splintering off into smaller groups in that group of 150, and that's kind of the magic number. And it mostly has to do with just the same reason that most people, cognizant memory, can only identify seven things or 7 numbers at a time. Which is why we have 7 digits, at least in the U.S., for phone numbers. You know, because that's the amount of information in our short-term memory that we can hold on to at any one particular time before things get shuffled out.
I feel like I'm learning so much right now.
It's a wonderful book, and if anything, it's just nice to know that there's people that have been thought process going into like why major cultural significances, like they talked a lot about Paul Revere's ride in the American Revolution, and the idea that like there are very specific things about why Paul Revere's ride worked, and it's not just because, you know, he rode through the eastern states warning about the British. Is like he was the right type of person at the right type of time, and he was essentially an information gatherer. He was what they call a maven, as well as the fact that he was a salesman. He was able to sell this information to the right people, and he wasn't just telling like random farmers, you know, who are going to go into this. He was telling people who were going to tell people. So he was hitting other cultural, you know, players in that space, and that information was able to spread.
It's basically root cause analysis. You're looking at a problem and trying to figure out, for a problem specifically, is how did all that occur. So you're looking at all the events that point down to it, and you identify 1 or maybe 3 different problems that occurred, like the Titanic, for example. Like how and why it sunk. It wasn't just because an iceberg hit it and why all these people died. It was a series of different things that happened that culminated in this bad storm. And
small things can lead to big conclusions, and at least in that circumstances, like you're talking about, cause and effect can literally just be broken. And that is true. When you're breaking down a problem, that's the best way of doing it. But this is actually breaking down how things spread and grow in a way that actually makes it, you know, what everyone's looking for, viral ability. Yeah. You know, which is impossible to recreate. So, but it is something that you can look into as far as bringing elements together. Yeah.
This sounds super awesome. For our listeners, I actually just looked it up while these two have been discussing this. The Tipping Point is by Malcolm Gladwell.
Yes.
If people are so interested.
Yeah, it's not a new book.
It looks like it's like $2 on Barnes & Noble right now.
Yeah,
so
it is a huge bestseller, and I have the audiobook version of it. He's written a couple of other ones, but yeah, that's the one that I'm digging through right now, because I always have one fiction book in Audible and I always have one business book. So
awesome.
Yay.
I wanted to switch turntables a little bit.
Yes.
Here.
Off track.
Oh, no, not at all. Like, that's just kind of the nature of our podcast.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, especially because when you start talking about some of those aspects, I feel like those are very, very interesting for not only, like, what you're doing, but also as LARPing and things like that.
If you're running a LARP, you've got to consider things like context.
Absolutely.
So, all the time.
And most LARPs are only about 100 people, 150 people at most.
Right.
It's rarer for the ones to hit like 200 or 300.
Yep. There's a reason for that.
Interesting.
Well, yeah, switching the tables a little bit, you as a player in a lot of these, I guess, role-playing games, and I know that you're in the season, like, ahead of me on Fury's Rage.
Right.
And playing, what, Johan Wilder?
Johan Wilder.
Wilder. Wilder.
Yes. So, because Joan Wilder, Johan Wilder, where literally Fury's Reach was essentially, at least my table was essentially romancing the stone. Which was lovely. It was super fun. I was in that with Sig, Mylan Sari, Dodger, and then Grant Imahara popped in for a little bit as well, too.
He spoke of that.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
What did he say? Did he enjoy it?
You might have to check out the podcast and...
God. Damn it, God. Well, it's fine. I
Isn't
enjoyed
that such a great escape for
Right. That is...
escape answer?
he was a fine gentleman to play with. But that was a good time. Rudy that was my real first time having Rudy GM me in any real like multi-session campaign kind of a situation.
So, out of curiosity, do you feel because you are in front of an audience, you alter your role-playing decisions a little bit on camera?
Not my decisions. How much I'm invested into my decisions, yes. Owning up to it, and it's definitely one of those where you need to be on 100%. It's like the casual things that we all do at our tables. That doesn't necessarily come into play. Active listening is cranked up to 1,000. Like the best role players that are on camera that I've seen are the ones that are active listening. Even if they're bored out of their goddamn skull, they are actively listening to what's happening and not having that situation was like, well, when am I going to talk? Or more importantly, like, well, what do I say in this situation? If you're actively listening, you're always thinking about an opportunity in order to make a moment better. So, and again, in my experience, it's been not so much about what am I going to do, but how can I make this moment better? Those are usually the questions I'm always asking myself when I'm in a, like, sit-down table in which I'm allowed to have the mental monologue of what's going on. You know?
I am very glad that you said that because when I joined Fury's Fate this season, I wasn't talking a lot, and my fear was, am I not talking enough? I'm not being, like, actory or performing enough, and for the longest time, I was like, is there something wrong with what I'm doing, Rudy? And he goes, no, like, you're listening.
Listen, and then with the only thing you have to go from that point is that listening is there, but then you need to be able to be comfortable to make a choice.
Yes.
So at some point, I would say, yes, keep listening, but then make a choice.
Oh, yeah.
And be comfortable with that choice, you know? And then just see what the hell happens, because it's also part of the GM's responsibility, too, and that's one of the challenges of GMing a live show is they also very much have... You have to consider this at the table, too, making sure everyone has their moment.
Yeah.
But it's even more so on camera.
Yeah.
Where you have to basically... You can't let someone slide. You know, there's also a responsibility that everybody has together when you're putting on a show where everyone knows that they have a responsibility to each other and the GM to do what's right. So
I have to note, like, it started occurring to me once I started watching a few episodes of Madness. I'm like, I was wondering if certain characters were getting more, challenge checks, taking a piece, than other characters, and honestly, like, you spread them out pretty evenly. Like,
it needs to happen.
You were really administering the suffering pretty evenly spread.
And they still get to choose, man. But there was only one time on Dread in which which thankfully I was like, I have to be ready if this person is going to want to do the challenge again. I have to be ready to be able to kind of pivot it in a new way because it was a person who basically did 2 challenges in a row. I'm like, okay, a third time, no. You know?
Yeah.
But thankfully that was not the case. It did not need to get to that point because my players are awesome.
Cool.
You know,
Very cool.
They're self-regulating.
Yeah.
It's lovely. You don't always get that benefit. So, playing on camera it's fun. But it's fun the same way that, like, anyone who's had a hobby, who enjoys their hobby, and at one point in their life gets paid to do that hobby, you will find this. The first time, like, if you paint miniatures, the first time that you are asked to paint a miniature and get paid for it, no matter who you are, you will see some kind of shift in, like, how important that thing is now. And you do get to make a choice on how you feel about that. Do I really like how this makes me feel right now? Or am I like, oh no, this is not why I do the hobby, And that's why not everyone can always perform role-playing games on camera, the same way that not everyone can be a professional miniature painter who likes to make minis.
I definitely experienced that when I was started becoming moved from cosplayer to a professional special effects guy. That was a big change.
Yeah, you have to. It's so hard to describe what it is. You just have to kind of experience it, and for everyone, it's a little different. It just is. It's just a choice. It just becomes a choice that you have to make instead of it being a passive. When you're doing it as a hobby, you get your endorphin reach in order to do it. Like, I enjoy doing this. It is fun for me. And then when you do it for someone else or you do it to get paid, you officially have to ask yourself, am I getting the same amount of endorphin rush doing this for somebody else? Or doing it for financial gain? Do I still feel the same way? Sometimes the answer is yes.
Yep, I would say yes. Getting paid for the first time being a dancer, still the endorphins are totally there. It actually becomes the question of, like, am I getting paid enough? Should I get paid for this, or am I doing this just for the fun of it? And am I getting paid enough for all the risk that I'm taking?
And it's a career path. And even I would even go so far as to say, was dancing just a hobby for you in the first place, or was it actually a career path for you?
It was my passion since I was 2 years old, and then became a career path.
So that's the thing. As a career path, I would also argue to say that, like, that is even a yes and. Because there's so many people who are in the hobby industry that do whatever they're supposed to do in order to make ends meet, and then they do that to feel better about themselves. But it sounds like you were on a constant upward trajectory towards what you were looking to go for.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I'm working on it.
Yeah. That's a lot of words, Kai. I'm
sorry. It has been a lot of words. Actually, I've been thoroughly enjoying them. Your rich baritones are quite enjoyable to the ears. So
they're hypnotic.
Right?
Am I making you sleepy?
Mildly, because I've been up since like 5:30 in the morning.
But you can easily. If
in
any
the good ways possible.
That's fine. I'm into it. And again, not to put you in a position again, but like. Toddler.
Yeah, I was just gonna say your kid's very lucky to have that voice. Like, just like put them soothingly to like sleep.
It's nice for soothingly putting them to sleep, but then on the flip side, it's also 5:30 in the morning, coming in, Daddy, clock yellow, which he has his little toddler clock, which means the clock is yellow. It's time to get up. If the clock's blue, he can't wake Daddy up. Phoenix, your clock is blue right now. No, Daddy, yellow. No, I know for a fact right now. You are tricking me to get out of this bed. Please go back to bed.
Like slowly dragging his teddy bear away.
Yeah, it is stupid cute, but that kid, because for a while he was getting up too early. Just Daddy colored trucks. He wants to watch his shows in the morning at like 5:30 in the morning. I'm like, Daddy needs to sleep for at least another half an hour. An hour if I can make it happen.
Right?
Yeah. I understand.
Yay.
I constantly make that question at 4:30 when my alarm goes off. I'm like, I need one more hour.
Yeah.
What's 4 a.m.? I don't believe in this time.
Yes. No, 4 a.m. is when you go home, Kai.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's when I finish going to a nightclub or something.
I
finish being a vampire.
I miss those days.
Me too.
They were lovely days.
So, I feel this is a beautiful segue point because we've been having these super deep conversations, and then we've kind of like bubbled back to a more kind of mundane aspect. So I have only a couple of questions from listeners.
Yeah.
Maxwell has a very important question.
I saw this question. Maxwell came.
Ivan, what do you sprinkle upon your face to make those chops just so damn beautiful?
The tears of my players.
Yes!
Suffer puppets. Yes.
Yes!
That's what happens. I use my beard oil is the tears of all of their hopes and dreams being quashed. Maxwell James, for the record, by the way, is a Critical Role producer. So I love him to death.
He and I have worked together on a few Steve Aoki music videos, actually.
Really?
So
Cool.
yeah,
No,
he has gotten around.
He is a wonderful. I remember when he was a freaking intern at Nerdist. You know, silly, wonderful man. So.
At least I believe so. He was an intern at Nerdist at one point in time? Wow. Okay, so that is one. We also have another listener. You might not have heard of her. Her name is Erica.
Ishi.
Yes. So she said, how does it feel being a sadistic monster? Oh, sorry, no, wait a minute. Actually, she said, you should ask him how you are able to improvise so well while those pulls are going along.
Oh, well, in context, Erika Ishii's in Madness, and I love her to death. So thank you for your question, Erika Ishii. That's a weird thing that I haven't quite figured out how or why I do it yet. I do know that I think it comes from a weird disadvantage that I've actually learned at one point. And I had some communication issues earlier in my life in which I was very good at speaking without necessarily thinking about what I'm saying. And that got me in trouble a lot. Because it was often, in college, I was often said, or when people would talk to me, hey, listen to what Ivan means, not what he says. All right? Because my context makes sense, or at least my the context of my words fit into the whatever the situation is okay, but I would be using words incorrectly. Like the actual meanings of the words would be incorrect. That was mostly because the words that I'm saying, they're not going through a filter and they're just coming out. A lot of people have that. It's like they're just foot and mouth disease, right? But knowing that was a problem, I spent a lot of time working about it, where I would actively try to make sure that I'm thinking about each word as they're coming out, and that forced me to slow my pace down a little bit and think about how the context of how I communicate is. And doing that, it kind of gave me this weird ability to constantly speak, and then be able to try to think at least a few milliseconds about what the context of each one of those words are as they're coming out. And even if it's a stream of consciousness thinking, because a lot of those monologues those improvisations are honestly stream of consciousness.
Wow.
It's just literally I'm starting somewhere, and I don't know where it's going to go. Like, I don't have the sentence. So a lot of the improvising element, and a lot of good improvisers do this as well, to people who do like sketch comedy and things like that, who do improv theater. It's like, I start with these 4 words, and then by the time I get to word 2 or 3, I try to plan out the next 6 words ahead of me. Or maybe it's just a sentence, like this sentence makes sense, and then we're going to move forward and string that sentence together. And then by the time you even realize it, you're a paragraph in, and you don't know what the last sentence was going to be when you started at the beginning. Does that make sense?
Almost like a better version of the instant messenger text prediction on.
There's a little bit of that.
That little meme that people bounce around sometimes.
Just keep tapping the auto predict, and that's not terribly far from the truth. The difference is that I used to do that, and it wouldn't make sense back in the day, but now I'm actually allowing it. It's beautiful in a weird way. Slowing down has allowed me to set dramatic pace.
For context, listeners, I almost said viewers again. Listeners, the particular magic that I think makes, for me at least, Madness so enticing and exciting to watch is since Ivan is not actually sitting down in a DM chair or anything like that, he's kind of orbiting around the players and getting into their bubble. Which is amazing because you see them kind of twitch and unsettled by it while they're dealing with the tower and pulling one of those wooden pieces, and they're trying to focus on this. Ivan is, again, orbiting around them, kind of buzzing in their ear, and he's talking about the tension, and he's talking about the risk that's involved, and he's slowly progressing the story. As they're taking longer and longer, it's becoming more and more tense, as this person is hiding from cultists and, finding a nook or a cranny to, avoid someone slipping past them. They're sniffing the air, they're getting so close, and as they manage to pull that piece and rest it on the top, Ivan is literally on the word, finishing the sentence of, "But you're okay."
It's nice. It's so sweet.
There's some beautiful poetry in the way that you pace it all out, and it was like it was always meant to be, which makes the Cthulhu aspect even more unsettling.
Well, and it's good too. It's a weird way to actually explore the characters' backgrounds a little more too, without the context of the story, because I can dredge up their terrible demons, and I can shove it in their faces, and I can force them to look at it while they're trying to pull these blocks from the tower.
I even remember a few times where you were kind of as they were approaching the tower, you're like, how do you feel about this? And they'll express one piece of something that they've got an uncertainty on or an anxiety about, and then you just grab hold of that and just hold it by the throat and just start shaking it in front of them a little bit, oh, so you're worried about failing, but failure is so dangerous, and you're just twisting the knife, as it were.
They shouldn't answer my questions. My questions. So
I do have one final question before we end this podcast session, and again, thank you for joining us. How did you feel when you found out that there are people out there on the internet who love your show so much that they actually have tattoos based off of your Sagas of Sundry, and we're not just talking about one or two people, but a few?
I have to say, it was surreal because it wasn't even. It was surreal for me, honestly. It broke it a little bit when we went to Gen Con, because shortly after Dread Gen Con occurred, and the Platform Alpha hosted a party at Gen Con exclusively for Sagas of Sundry, and I am late to that party because I just got done running a game, for my System Outbreak Undead, so I was literally late to getting to this party, and I'm getting text from Satine. She's like, "Where are you? People are asking for you." So I'm hoofing it over there, completely distracted because Gen Con's a very busy convention, and I have a booth there, so I'm actually doing business there as well too. And I literally bust into this bar, that's about 4 or 5 blocks away from the major convention center, and I bust in this place, and it's like 200 people who all scream when I walk in all at the same time. It was like my birthday times 20. Walking into this place, and they've got a tower, and they've got a Jenga tower, and it's almost at max capacity, where they've managed to make enough pulls that it's it has gotten so high, and that was the point in which I was like, oh my god, people like this show. What? And then starting to see the tattoos and stuff, it was wow, because that was when the tipping point was for me. So when the tattoos started coming out, I was like, okay, this is escalated. And at least for the few people who you're mentioning about, they took some real emotional meaning from the show. I believe the term that came from Pavlonia was do what you dread. And I was like, oh my god. I knew that these stories have an opportunity to make an impact on people, but I didn't realize it was having a life effect on some of these folks, enough so that they felt that they had to put it on their body for the rest of their life. So it was weird. It was lovely. It was lovely,
I have to admit, like, when it comes to LARPing and, also just consumption of media, like stories, video games, things like that, the ones that are psychologically kind of, like, stressing to certain degrees, they're some of the most exciting. The ones that are psychologically taxing or, like, the more horror environments are always the ones that, like, if you're kind of shaking and scared or, like, it has that element of impact.
They stick with you.
Yeah.
And it's funny because everyone enjoys a good, loving, uplifting story. Everyone loves good wish fulfillment with D&D. But, when you cross your own boundaries or where you are asked to challenge your own boundaries, that's when some real self-work can get done when you're going outside of that comfort zone.
You can learn a lot about yourself, and I think LARP, role-playing in general, not even LARP, role-playing in general, with a good storyteller, a good story, a good system, a good experience, that you can actually really, really experiment and experience some, like, growth and, like, direction. That is kind of unexpected when you think about it. This is a hobby or just a game or a casual thing to some people.
And the challenge is that some people, especially when you're in a bigger group, everyone's at a different emotional readiness for that kind of self-work. Some people are ready to make that leap and they're ready to go into it. And some people are not quite there yet. Or maybe some people have already made that leap and they're coming back for more. So when you're around new people, you kind of have to have the social cognizance to understand that. And that's one of the differences why I think I like the media element of it so much, because everyone experiences it on their own time, in their own parameters. And no one's being challenged by a friend or a lover or a coworker that isn't ready to be challenged yet, so to speak. Yeah.
Cool.
Ivan, where can they find you on social media?
I am under all the things as Hydra, HYDRA, _LORD.
Hydra Lord. Awesome.
Hydra Lord.
Hail Hydra.
That's easy.
Sin, where can they find you on social media?
Instagram, Cynthia _ Marie, and also now on Twitter at SinDancer.
Ooh, welcome to Twitter! Or welcome back to Twitter.
Yeah.
It's rough.
So, for me, I've actually done a little bit of a rebranding. If you guys followed me on my previous social medias, the name has changed. It should auto-direct you from it, but I will no longer be using Commissar props because it is a pain in the ass to spell. Instead, I will be going for a little bit of a pun and a little bit of a reference to Japanese demons that I like so much. My brand is now Yokai Props, YOKAI PROPS. That is both on Twitter and also on Instagram. So hit me up and say hi. I'd appreciate it.
All right, and you can find me on Instagram under Ryan Omega, on Twitter on Ryan OMGA, and sometimes when doing Maze Arcana shows, you will see Life Action Roleplay as either one of the people involved in the chat on any of those shows. That would be me, so you can always talk to me in the chat. I am pretty active if I'm not on Fury's Fate, which is on Wednesdays.
Also, just a reminder to everyone, we do still have our Facebook group. It is slowly getting a bit more popular. There's been some very cool discussions going on and things like that. So if you would like to do us a favor and join that, it's life.action.roleplay.hype. And you'll be able to find us on that. So go ahead and jump into it and engage in the rampant nerdery that is that den.
And and before I forget, a big shout out to a lot of our international listeners.
Holy crap, I can't believe it.
I can't believe it. Like 13% of our audience as of right now is from Sweden.
Yes.
Hey, Sweden.
Hello,
Hi,
Sweden.
guys.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah,
Ladies.
and then again, also a presence from Brazil and Germany, Canada,
we have
UK.
Jennifer Fuss, who's on Germany, who said hello to us. We also have Monica Viaja in Mexico, who also listens to our podcast. So hello, you guys. Thank you for listening to us.
Podcasters are
And people in Poland as well. Hello.
Hello.
tell your friends. Please get involved. Hit us up and talk to us.
We're actually active. We're not just sitting there.
We love feedback. We love opinions. If you guys have are visiting or things like that, and you would like to potentially be a guest, then let us know. Otherwise, we're actually eventually going to try and look into ways of maybe trying to project ourselves so we can do kind of cross-country or cross-international kind of interviews in the future. But
Kai is building the teleport machine right now, but it still has a little bit of work to do.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, bye.
Bye.